All right, so hey, today we're going to jump into Lucid and the topic of what Peter Rawlinson has done before the end of the year, and that is deliver on his promise of bringing cars to the market and out to some Lucid deliveries. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. Joining me today is, of course, one of the best Lucid lovers I know, and that is Mr. Warren Redlich. I had to put that joke in there, Warren. Great to have you in on this today. All right, Warren, so let's just get into it. Lucid's delivered some cars. Do you have to eat any crow on this? Or
no. Well, I mean,
okay
sure. I said they wouldn't deliver a car, and they delivered 6 cars. As far as we know, 5 or 6 cars to outside customers, all of whom appear to be, deeply embedded with the company in some way or other.
So the delivery event, they claim, was 20 cars, I believe, coming onto the scene. With the fact that they've put some of these vehicles out there on the ground and actually humans are driving these things now. What are your thoughts in terms of them hitting their number at 500 plus cars by end of year? That's just another 6 weeks out.
I would say he's delivered maybe 5 or 6 cars to a very select group of people. We don't know how many cars they've delivered. They did not deliver cars. They have the big thing coming up is they have their November 15th earnings call for the third quarter, which I believe goes through the end of September. So they should still be reporting 0 revenue on their Q3 investor, their financials. And then what happens for their, what are their expenses? How much have they spent? I think a good question to ask is how many vehicles did they actually deliver? Are they going to tell us? How many of those vehicles went to outside customers versus employees and insiders? I'm pretty confident that some of the 5 or 6 people who got cars delivered are significant shareholders of the company. Dr. Terrace, Tesla, whose Twitter account is Tesla to Lucid 2. He's been following Lucid since 2017. I would say it's highly likely that he has stock in the company. I can't know that. How many of those people who took deliveries are, heavy investors in Lucid and therefore committed to making it look like the company is better than it is? And, practically speaking, how much money has Lucid spent over the last 5 years to deliver 5 cars, right?
Yeah.
But look, they're either going to prove me wrong or they aren't. They're either going to deliver a lot of cars by the end of this year or they aren't. As long as they're delivering cars to themselves and to insiders and employees, they're not really delivering cars in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, the delivery event here, I'm just looking at a quick report here from Car Scoops. Unclear how many examples were delivered, but it does appear that they had more than around 20 vehicles that were delivered, models which were delivered.
No, they had 5 or 6.
Well, I'm just saying this is what Car Scoops is reporting. And of course, if you watch the delivery event, either they had to re-roll the tape.
They might have brought in other prototypes to drive around at the event, but as far as I can tell, you can only identify 5 or 6 people who bought a car. There's Dr. Terrace, there's AJ Anderson, there's this guy who's like CEO or some high-ranking guy with Nest. There's like 5 or 6 identifiable people who bought cars, and then there's Eric Bach, who's the senior VP of Lucid Motors. So I don't count when the number 2 guy in the company takes his delivery. I don't think that counts.
Sure. No, totally. But the fact they're putting cars out, the manufacturing line seems to be in place. If they hit the 500 units,
they could have been hand built. Those are hand built cars. Maybe they built each car for $10 million and they sold them for $200,000 and they lost $9.8 million a car.
So your position is still that Lucid is not going to deliver any cars.
They're not going to deliver any cars.
It sounds to me like if they're hand building, then that's not really a delivery, process. So if that's the case. Lucid's hand building cars.
Okay, here's the thing. They delivered 5 or 6 cars in one event, right?
Come on, Warren, they can't be hand building these cars.
Yeah, they can. They have 1,400 employees. They can be. But here's the question. They delivered 5 or 6 cars about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago. How many have they delivered since?
Well, that is something we would love to know.
None. They haven't delivered any.
Yeah, so your stance is still strong.
No one has tweeted, hey, I just got my Lucid, right? Yeah. There were 5 or 6 people who got it at that moment, plus Eric Bach, the senior VP. And, in 10 days, no one else has said, hey, I got my car. What's going on?
a few select unknown videos on YouTube showing the Lucid Air drive, or excuse me, at least charging at Electrify America. We have seen
That's
some of
Dr.
those
Terrace.
in the
That was
wild.
Dr. Terrace. He's one of the 5 or 6.
Yeah. So all right, so your point is still strong then, in the sense that this is never going to happen, and
Well,
Rawlinson is.
if they're ramping production, if you delivered 5 or 6 on one day, shouldn't you deliver 10 the next day, and then 12 the next day, and then 15 the
Absolutely.
next day? And
Would agree.
you know, if it's a manufacturing line and they've got their manufacturing line in place and they're manufacturing, and then they're improving their manufacturing process along the way, then if they delivered 5 or 6 on day one, then that should be scaling, and it should be 10, and it should be 20, and there should have been 50 vehicles delivered yesterday.
Yeah.
Where are they?
At that rate, daily at 50, 100 days, that would be 5,000. So what are we talking
Well, but even if
about
it's
here?
even if it's
that-
5
that-
a week,
Yeah, that would
But
have
they-
to be about the number if they're going to even get close to the 20,000 vehicles that
They
they're
gotta do
talking
50
about
a
in
week.
2022.
they got to do 50
Yeah.
a week roughly to get to 500 by the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So 50 a week, are they going to? But they should have done at least 10.
Yeah.
10 more. When you use the reference, they've got their manufacturing line in place. If those vehicles came off a manufacturing line, then where's the next ones, right?
Well,
If you
maybe
delivered
that's-
5 or 6 off the manufacturing line, then there should be 5 or 6 more coming, and 5 or 6 more coming, and 5 or 6 more coming, and then 10 more coming, and then 20 more coming as you ramp. Where's the stream of cars?
That is the question that I think everybody's going to be asking now that we've started to see some of these deliveries going to, the small elves of Lucid that are making these cars. All right, so back to the point.
Let me just say this. So I talked to somebody who has inside connections with Lucid. And I believe it's a reliable source, but of course it's an opinion, whatever. My impression is that they know they're having trouble scaling, that they can't really produce cars in volume, that their battery pack is too complicated and too large and too difficult to manufacture, that the vehicle that they built on top of it is too large and too difficult to manufacture, that they're not really able to scale production. They don't really have manufacturing down, and they had to get some vehicles out for the sake of showing off. And then they'll have this November 15th event. And I would say this, are they going to take questions at the November 15th earnings call?
Yeah, that'll be
Are they going to
interesting.
take retail investor questions? Are they going to take institutional investor questions? Are they going to take analyst questions? Are there any analysts who cover Lucid? I don't even know. So if they have never taken hard journalist questions in public. Never have they taken hard journalists. They didn't take them at the September VO. They didn't take them for the SPAC merger announcement.
Because of the situation. They'd have to be taking questions now. I mean, at this point, you're delivering cars. You have to. You would think they would. You would expect that.
Right. So I think November 15th is a really big deal, and anybody who watches Lucid should watch the November 15th events closely. How much money did they lose in the quarter is a big question. Yeah. Do they give hard numbers on how many vehicles have been delivered, and what hard numbers do they give? Unfortunately, we're not going to see revenue. Because if they had to report revenue from deliveries, we would know how many cars they actually delivered, because the revenue numbers are going to be audited. Right? They have an auditor who's not going to lie about how much money they brought in. But as long as they don't have revenue, they have to worry about it. So you really have to wait until like February 15th for the Q4 numbers to get audited numbers. And why is it taking 45 days from the end of September to get your earnings call out? Why did it take? Tesla does its numbers.
Big issue.
Tesla does its numbers in 3 to 4 weeks. Why is it taking them 8 weeks to get their numbers out? They don't have revenue to report. They only have to do the expense side. They didn't even have revenue. So how hard is it to get your numbers together? You got $4 billion in your cash pile there. Why can't you afford to get the audited numbers out in 8 weeks? Does it take that long to stage your lies? I don't know.
Woo. Okay. All right then. Staging lies now. All right. So Warren, you just tell
that's
them
not new
is,
for me. I've been saying that stuff about them for a while.
All right, so company critics are pointing to a $44 billion market cap as being extremely overvalued, considering it basically is now only producing and delivering cars this late in the year. While it's true that obviously they've had expectations, what are your thoughts on this market cap and the recent stock surge? You think we're going to see a massive fall off on this?
Their SPAC merger projection was that in 2026 they're going to sell 250,000 vehicles with an average selling price of around $92,000, and I don't think it's credible. But if you buy that story, And you could say, okay, well, what's a decent price to sales ratio for $24 billion in revenue? Well, yeah, the current valuation is not bad, but that's assuming that you believe that they're going to deliver on everything they say. And if
Right.
you say, well, if they only deliver on half of what they say, then it's value too high. And you have to have some sort of risk profile and say, they might not make it, right? There's some, and don't forget they have to do a funding round at the end of next year. So
Hmm.
you're going to be diluted. Whatever stock you hold today is going to be diluted because they're going to have to do a funding round end of 2022. They've said they're going to run out of cash. That's why the November 15th earnings is going to be really important. The financials is going to be really important because we're going to see how much money they spent and how much money they lost, right?
Yeah, it definitely is going to give us their burn rate and whether or not this company is in trouble without having to go back to the markets and try to do something there. It also they had announced their reservations now at over 13,000 compared to what was just out in May, it looks like. Yeah, 9,000 in May,
Yeah.
in mid-October. So they continue to climb in reservations. Granted, that doesn't mean anything if you can't produce the
Oh, wait,
vehicle.
wait. They've had 13,000 reservations for a while. That's not a new number. And the last time they reported numbers materially with
Was in May.
reservations, if you did the math, it was, I think it was 11,000 reservations and about 10,000 of them were for the Air Pure, which is an $80,000 vehicle. So you can't
Yeah,
get to your average selling price of $110,000 a vehicle if 12, 13, if 90% of your vehicles are sold for $80,000,
correct.
right?
Yeah. So
So,
your thought is still this is an overpriced stock then. You where it's trading at today, heavily
if you
overpriced,
if
or
you
are we
look at
on
their
track?
if you look at their projections critically, how many vehicles they say they're going to sell at what price point, and then you look at their reservations and you say, wait a minute, when you told us that your reservations added up to this much revenue, that meant that 90+% of your reservations were for the $80,000 car, and your
Mm,
whole business model is to sell the $170,000 car, and then the $140,000 car, and then the $120,000 car. If the only reservations you have basically are the $80,000 car, then you're losing money on every car for longer. You're never going to achieve that. The idea that you're going to sell, they're claiming in 2026 they're going to sell 250,000 cars with an average selling price of $92,000. And the year before that, it's over $100,000 average selling price. But if the high volume car that you sell is $80,000, you can't sell enough of the higher priced cars to get to your average selling price. And then your numbers don't work out. Then you don't really have $24 billion of revenue in 2026. You have $15 billion of revenue in 2026, and you're continuing to lose money all the way through. When do they
mhm.
become profitable if they can't sell cars over $100,000 in any volume?
Well, I think that's going to be the case with any electric vehicle maker. They're going to not be profitable in the beginning. It's not like they're going to,
No, but
ramp in the.
they're projecting profits in 2026 based on selling 250,000 cars at an average selling price of $92,000. Their
Mhm.
reservation profile is an average selling price of less than $90,000. It's like $87,000 average selling price in their reservation profile if you look at the main numbers. So
Granted,
so it's not realistic. So they're not going to have the profits they claim they're going to have if they don't have the revenue they claim they're going to have.
well, that's by 2026, so that we're still
Right. So
4 years
when are they
away
going to
from
be
that.
profitable then?
Well, I look at it if I compare against Tesla. I mean, Tesla wasn't profitable for 7 years. So if I
Well, when
give
did
a
Lucid
ramp up,
start? No, wait. Tesla started in 2008.
it wasn't
Tesla
profitable
started
for
selling
seven
cars in
years.
2008. They became profitable much later than that. It was
Yeah,
12
I
years to
understand.
profits.
I thought it was 7 years to profits.
I don't think they made
Regardless,
reliable profits until 2019 or 2020, and they started in 2008. They had their
so the
IPO in
li-
2010.
so the case here on Lucid, profitability may not be a question. It may be just them going out into the markets for more money. If their burn rate continues to be at this, and if they can't keep up with their reservations in terms of the price point that you're talking about.
Their business model is premised on being able to raise more money so they can keep losing money. That doesn't sound like a good investment to me.
That sounds like a startup to me. That
But
sounds like Uber and
when
Facebook and Google
no, and
and
the
Amazon.
other side of it is they make claims about their cars that I find not credible. So, for example, Peter Rawlinson will brag about the power to weight ratio of their motor. Well, if you're so good on power to weight, why does your vehicle weigh 5,200 pounds, 650 pounds more than Model S?
That will be a question.
Well, I mean, but if you're going to brag about your efficiency on weight, then why does your vehicle weigh 650 pounds more than the vehicle that you're supposedly competing with? I think that's a question they don't have an answer for.
Well, I think some of it is due to their in-house powertrain production. There's some things that they've done internally with that. Obviously, their battery architecture, sure, whether it's the Wonderbox and all those kind of, elements that we have yet to see really in full force out there being utilized in full
Right, but
production. Hopefully, that's all going to be real.
there's another point there. There's another point there. They have claimed that their Dream Edition has a 118 kilowatt hour pack, and that the Grand Touring Edition has a 112 kilowatt hour pack.
Right.
The numbers that they said to different audiences at different times varied. It was 118, it was 113, it was 112. But the document that they filed with the EPA to back up their 520 mile range claim was a 924 volt, 150 amp hour battery, which adds up to 138.6 kilowatt hours. And if you ever look at a picture of the rear seat of the Lucid Air Dream Edition, there's no footwell. It's a really awkward rear seat foot position, and the only answer for that is because they crammed extra batteries in there to get the range. And I'm sorry, I believe. Look, I can't prove it, right? People have said, "Well, it's not fair for you to say this, Warren. You haven't driven their car." Well, they haven't let me driven their car. They haven't let me drive. They didn't invite me to their event, right? They only invited favorable voices to their events. They've never invited a critical voice to take a look at anything. So, what's there's going to be at some point Green the Only. There's a guy on Twitter named Green the Only.
Yep.
At some point, he's going to get access to a Lucid Air, and he's going to be able to look into the hardware and software, and he's going to the code, and he's going to be able to see how big is that battery pack. At some point, Sandy Monroe or somebody like him is going to tear down a Lucid Air, and we're going to see how big the battery pack really is. I believe it's a 138.6 kilowatt hour pack. It's not 118 or 112 kilowatt hour pack. It's not credible.
Would give you the math to be able to get that range.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that would explain why there's no rear seat footwell. Why are my feet so high on the rear seat? What kind of luxury car has no rear seat footwell?
Yeah. Which is interesting when you look at the interior design on these. And that's been mentioned by a couple of the journalists that have actually had a chance to ride in some of the Lucids in the pre-test before they were letting anybody drive them. When you look at shares, Lucid surged by 47%. This was during the trading that obviously happened during the delivery event. First customer deliveries they're talking about, et cetera. Do you feel like this is a sustainable stock price for Lucid the way it's setting at right now, if they were to continue to do deliveries throughout the end of the year?
Oh, if they continue deliveries, if they deliver 500 cars by the end of the year, then yeah, absolutely. But the practical reality is the precursor to LCID was CCIV. And CCIV had a run up before the SPAC merger, and then it plummeted after the SPAC merger. So if you buy now, are you sure you're not buying at the peak before the collapse? They've done this once before. They told a story. They jumped up the price. Then they pulled off their merger. They pulled the rug out from under investors. They said, okay, we're not going to deliver 6,000 cars this year. We're only going to deliver 577. And now they've said, oh, we've delivered cars and all this good stuff is happening. And the question is, when do they pull the rug out? When do they pull the rug out again? At some point, they got to pull the rug. It has to be by February 15th. February 15th is when the earnings numbers come for the fourth quarter, and that's ultimately when the rug has to be pulled out. Or I'm wrong, right? Look, you're hearing my opinions. It's entirely possible that I'm wrong, and they're going to prove me wrong. And we're not going to really know the answer to that till February 15th, because November 15th will not be when we won't have audited revenues of significance on November 15th. So we're gonna have to wait for February 15th for that. But does Lucid pull the rug out sooner? Do they announce, by the end of the year, you're gonna know if they delivered 500 cars, right?
Sure.
They can't really hide 500 cars.
Well, absolutely. Well, I think it will be fanfare to the nth degree if they start deliveries at any kind of scale. That's only going to continue to drive the stock for sure. So that would be the play that I think a lot of people would be going after.
Yeah, but at what point do Lucid investors say, wait a minute, suppose they don't have another delivery event. Suppose they have a trickle of cars and they deliver 50 cars by the end of the year. At what point does a Lucid investor say, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong here?
Yeah, I think that's when they would do it, before the end of the year. If, of course, they've hit the fact that they actually put a car on the ground, so that's one achievement. Sure, they've delivered that. They say that the Casa Grande location manufacturing facility is up and running. All right, so if that is truthful and that is happened, then they've hit that is what their anticipation was. And if they can even get close to that 500 car delivery, that's the next kind of nail in the coffin. If they don't hit it, that would be the big challenge, I think, for a lot of people. But to your point, in February, that's when profits would be realized for the first time, at least on their balance
Not profits,
sheet.
revenue.
Revenue for the first time on their balance sheet that
Yeah,
people could look at. So
my joke is that they've spent $6 billion to deliver 6 cars. They probably haven't really spent $6 billion, but
I
yeah,
like it. I like it.
they
So,
haven't
all
spent
right.
$6
So
billion dollars yet.
let's paint a different picture here then, Warren. Let's assume they do get it done. All right. Let's for the good of the electric vehicle community, let's assume that we have another electric car maker that's making electric cars here from the United States, and they get it done. Lucid is that player. And they actually can roll this out and go into mass production. And let's say, we won't even know about their battery tech or anything like that. Let's just look at deliveries. With that being the case, do you feel like this changes the landscape at all for the electric car market? Or do you feel like Rivian and others like Rivian will start to really kind of play, even though that's not really a comparison to the Lucid, but to a certain
No,
extent, you might get a buyer in there that might go Rivian.
I think if Lucid becomes a significant player in the $100,000 plus market, like they're trying to do, if they displace Mercedes S-Class and BMW 7 Series, and
Right.
there's some other high-end vehicles that I'm not that much of a $100,000 plus vehicle buyer that I would know, but if they start displacing a lot of those vehicles, it's really good for the environment.
Sure.
It's very bad for Mercedes and BMW, but it's really good for the environment. It's really good for cleaning the air. It's really good for a lot of things. So, I hope they prove me wrong. But in terms of practically speaking, their impact on the overall EV market, their target is to produce 250,000 cars a year in 2026.
Yeah.
Tesla produced 240,000 cars last quarter. By 2026, I expect Tesla to be producing 10 million cars, and Lucid is a footnote. It's not bad,
Yeah.
and I'm happy they're there if they succeed.
Yeah, definitely not a comparison, I think, into
Right.
Tesla. It
And
just
Neo Motors has delivered 100,000 cars already. Neo Motors will be producing more cars. BYD will be producing more electric cars.
Mhm.
If Volkswagen and Mustang Mach-E and the Ford F-150 Lightning, if they are able to scale, then Lucid is just one player of many, and it's not bad to have them. And they're hitting a niche that no one else is really hitting, right?
Yeah.
If you believe their story that they're sort of this post-luxury Mercedes S-Class competitor, then sure. Because Tesla isn't really going for the Mercedes S-Class customer with the Model S.
For
Model
sure.
S
Yeah,
is maybe.
you're exactly right. Well, I think
I think
Mercedes is also struggling with their own EV line. Obviously, BMW has slowed their potential as well. So maybe all of this, at least in the superclass of luxury vehicles, whether maybe Lucid being the first one really rolling out a big event, could be ahead of the schedule against which is really their real competitor, which is going to be gas vehicles and the other EVs in that
right.
class, whether it's a
Right.
Model S or you go into the Model 7 on the BMW, which is where you're getting into the 100K and plus 130 and up. So that is super luxury, definitely a completely different scenario. I want to talk to you about Rivian, and before we get going here, Rivian and their IPO. What is your position on Rivian? What are your thoughts on how this company could go to market?
They indicated in their IPO documents that they've delivered, I think it was 150 or so R1Ts to, and
Right.
nearly all to employees. It's not like they're
Yeah.
delivering them outside the company yet, but they're targeting delivering 1,000. I think it's more than 1,000 vehicles by the end of the year. So, assuming that they're, and my same source said that they are having problems scaling. So, I don't know, but it sounds like they're making progress. I think they show promise. They have a very interesting niche that is roughly competitive with Cybertruck, but a little bit different. I think their vehicle's very heavy. It's a 7,000 pound vehicle, which Cybertruck I think is going to come in under 5,000 pounds. So it's very heavy. That really limits the payload that it can carry, because if you're trying to stay under 8,500 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, and you have a 7,000 pound vehicle, you can only carry 1,500 pounds. And it's a smaller truck too. It's not as big as an F-150, but there's a niche there that they're trying to fill, and I think there's enough of a market for that niche. And they've said that their factory, in their IPO document, they said that they Their production capacity eventually in the factory that they have now will be 150,000 vehicles a year. If you figure $70,000 a vehicle average selling price, which is a ballpark guess, it gets you to around $10 billion in revenue. Now, and that's probably a few years away. You've got a rough market cap of $52 billion from the IPO, the way I count the numbers. So is 52 billion kind of I still think that market cap is kind of high for a company that hopes to deliver, $10 billion of revenue 3 or 4 years from now. But, it's not insane. And, apparently they may be going to this IPO this coming week.
Right.
I think there's and a lot of the way I read it, I think they're going to raise $9 billion, which is a really good thing for them in terms of having enough cash on hand to be able to carry through with innovation. It's actually one of the mistakes that maybe Lucid made was they only raised about $4 billion in their SPAC merger. Rivian is going for like a larger number. A lot of the $9 billion is taken by inside, what are called cornerstone investors, the underwriters. So I think of the $9 billion, only $3 billion is going to be available to retail investors. So that's going to limit supply, and thus you're going to see the demand for the stock be high. So I think they're not going to have a problem selling their stock at the IPO at that $60 or so share price.
Right.
But I just think, as an investor, I'm not buying because I'm looking at that and saying, okay, I think it's good. I'm not sure it's that much better than Cybertruck for the niche that they're going for. It has a certain niche value in terms of like rock climbing and, really hard trails. I don't know how big that niche is. And I think Cybertruck, of course, Cybertruck isn't ready yet, right? But I'm worried about the long-term market potential for Rivian if Cybertruck delivers in volume.
Well, yeah, well, in that, and you've got, of course, the Lightning with Ford that could be kind of a head-to-head, more of a head-to-head. I feel at least in terms of design.
Lightning is a much bigger vehicle than Rivian, and it doesn't have the competitive advantages that Cybertruck has, and Ford isn't going to make that in volume. Ford is going to make maybe 50,000 a year for starters, where Tesla's going for 300,000 a year, and maybe ultimately $1 million a year if Cybertruck. So, if Cybertruck is somewhat competitive in the space that Rivian is going for, that may be a challenge for them.
Yeah.
But, it's a really cool looking truck that has a lot of potential. It does certain things that I don't think Cybertruck will be able to do, the tank turn. So I'm reasonably optimistic that they can get there. And I'm concerned about the weight, that 144 kilowatt hour pack, that 7,000 pound curb weight. That's a problem that may matter to people. We just have to see when it gets out there. But, if they say they're going to deliver 150,000 cars a year, capacity, and they're going to grow and expand, and having the $9 billion cash pile makes it much more viable that they can grow and expand.
Yeah, so, I think that's going to be.
And then they have an agreement with Amazon. Amazon owns roughly 20% of the company. They have an agreement to sell 100,000 vans to Amazon. And I think that electric delivery van space, I don't see any competition for that. I mean, Tesla has not indicated.
Exactly.
Tesla has not indicated they're going to make an electric delivery van. If their electric delivery van is compelling, 100,000 in the next few years, that could scale. If they can scale that could be really big.
Yeah, it could be a big factor for them, and could be the sleeping giant within Rivian, in terms of just the capability to use what they've got in terms of the R1, the pickup truck and the SUV to really kind of go at least kind of much like what I feel the Model S did for Tesla, which was the postcard that pretty much or the billboard, I should say, that everybody bought off of. And the same thing with Model 3. When the Model 3 went on sale, it was essentially
I would say the R1T and R1S could be sort of the halo car for Rivian that they use to establish a really solid brand. And then they sell cargo vans in volume. And the problem is the cargo van market isn't really care about your consumer branding, right? But maybe they make an electric delivery van and they go ahead and they make if you figure about that market, maybe they make a motor coach out of it. Maybe they make like an RV out of it too and sell it as an RV. I don't know how big that market is, but I could see a lot of consumers wanting to buy a van like that and customize it.
It'll be interesting.
There's some potential in that market if they can make that work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think just in that era of, which we've already started to see kind of this van life start to evolve out of most of what you look at, especially in the millennials, where we see a lot of that kind of movement. It'll be interesting to see, I think, whether or not they can break away, whether they use Amazon more as a sugar daddy to help seed the innovation toward some of the retail vehicles that would really be the winners for them to compete with, whether it's Tesla or Ford.
I just wanted to say the problem for me is, like, if I'm thinking about investing in Lucid or Rivian at this early stage, you sort of say, okay, well, what's the upside of this company?
Yeah.
If I buy it now, could the stock 10x? Maybe it's a 5x, maybe it's a 10x. I don't see it being much more than a 10x from anything I see, but I see more than a 10x in Tesla already. Like I see I see Tesla 10xing from here, and it's a much more credible, much more reliable story that Tesla is going to 10x from here than the speculative nature of these startup companies. So, my tagline, apparently my branding line for myself is Tesla is the next Tesla. If you're looking for the next Tesla, just buy Tesla. Tesla is going to grow that much that they're the next Tesla. They're like 12 startups in one company.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. Warren Redlich, always great to have you on the show. Insights are amazing. Thanks for stopping in on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for putting me up with the surroundings.
No problem. All right, you guys are listening in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us some kudos over there. If you have not joined the YouTube channel, you got to jump in over here because you'll get a chance to see these kind of interviews along with a lot of our analysis on blockchain, innovation, AI, autonomy. That's really where TechPath goes. Diving deep, obviously we've been doing a lot of blockchain recently, but we'd love to get your input on whether you would want more EV coverage, whether you're looking for more stock and innovation coverage, because there are a lot of companies that we've covered it, whether it's BYD, NIO, et cetera, especially in the EV space and the battery space. Put your comments below, and of course, you can always reach me on Twitter @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.